Action.
It's like very... Yes! I remember she said, okay, just the movie, okay? Nothing else. And I was thinking like, what do you mean nothing else?
This is my tea, and I'm sipping it. Cheers, yeah? Let's spill the tea. Yeah?
How did I decide? Well, let's just say that there was no real decision making in terms of you wake up one day and you decide you want to be a priest. To be honest, I had always wanted to become a religious brother because I studied in St. Joseph School, the government, St. Joseph Government's primary school and secondary school, which at that time had a lot of brothers, you know, LaSalle brothers, yeah? And they were wearing white cassocks like this, you know, the principal, the brothers were teaching, and they were extremely, very, very influential. So I do remember there was one day, I can't remember, I think I was in primary school possibly, when I saw these brothers and a thought came into my head and said, this is what I want to be when I grow up. I had no idea what I was talking about, and it was just a very spontaneous thing from somewhere within. And I forgot all about that. So my real desire at that time was when I went to high school and then graduated from university. There was this clear thing I wanted to do. One, I want to be a pilot, obviously. I want to fly a plane. I was in love, I was madly in love with aeroplanes and things like this. But then I discovered an inconvenient fact. You actually have to be good in mathematics to be a pilot. Darn, I was quite terrible in that. Secondly, you actually need to have good eyesight. I have very bad myopia. I'm wearing contact lenses for the longest time now. So, this was the basic requirements of a pilot. And thirdly, I was too short. Apparently, there is a specific height to be a pilot, a minimum height. I think it's about 180 centimeters or something like that as a minimum height, because you need to be able to reach the pedal on the plane and sit back and stuff like that.
A few minutes later.
So that was actually how it is. But I'm talking about something else altogether, I realize. The question is, how did I decide to become a priest, right? Well, I suppose that's the whole thing, you don't decide in an instant. The desire that I have, remember, as a schoolboy, came back possibly 30 years later. It was incredible. Oh, no, I have to mention something that is key. After I finished Form 6, finished my STPM at St. Joseph Secondary School, I did have, encouraged by some Catholic friends, we went for a weekend seminary program that was organized by St. Peter's College, sort of like the vocation program, I'm not sure if they still have it. Anyway, I went to that program, and at that time, the rector of the seminary was Father John Ha. Yes, the Archbishop Emeritus John Ha. He was the rector at that time. I had an exciting weekend. Part of the reason was, I fell in love with this entire idea of living as a community, following a specific program, having to wake up for prayers. There was something very attractive in that. And there was a seminarian who accompanied me throughout. And guess who that was? He was Seminarian Richard Ng, who is today the Bishop of Buri. So I'm not sure if it's all in the stars, whatever that means. But so after that weekend, I was really, really excited. So the rector had a one-to-one conversation with every young man who went through that program. So I did reveal to the rector that I really felt called. I really would like to sign up for the seminary. And bless the good man, he was so wise. He said, "Excellent. Now ask me again in 3 years' time." He said, "No, I will not accept you now." He said, "You're only 18 years old. You are on your application form, you are about to enter the university, yeah, because it was in between, yeah, following the end of STPM and entering into university. He said, if I accept you now, and mind you, you are qualified, you have an STPM already. But if I accept you now, experience tells me that you will not stay because you have not had an experience of life outside. So when I think back, every time I think back about my vocation, I'm brought back to that moment because of the wisdom of this priest. Had he been, in a sense that concerned about numbers, he would have said, yes, please I'll take you in right now. But then my life would have taken a very different turn. Yeah? I think I would probably, and I agree, I would probably have left the seminary after a year or two because I was still pretty raw and have not been exposed to the world. So to fast forward, I finished my university degree, I got a job, and it was only after 10 years of being in the corporate world that one day, suddenly, okay, one evening as I was waiting for the bus to go home in Singapore, it was like a 1 hour's ride home on the bus. It was one evening, I remember, about 8 o'clock in the evening. I was tired, I was frustrated, I was stressed because I have a client's contract to finish in the morning. For the morning, I haven't computed the numbers. I was worried that my boss would be upset because these are the figures he is not likely he won't like the figures I'm proposing, and so on and so forth. So there was a number of factors, and I've been working overtime for like 2 months. Every night I'm the last to leave the office because I was poor in mathematics. Everyone else, compute and got the figures and get it done, and I was stuck in a job. That last 2 years of my job was really quite miserable. I mean, it wasn't what I want to do. I can talk about the job later, but that was that moment in time. One clear thought came to me as I waited for the bus. And the thought came in these words: wasn't there a time you wanted to be a priest? It's hit me right there because I was thinking like, yeah, what am I doing? I have a ton of contracts in my bag. I hated it. And I'm not going to want to work. I mean, I have no aspiration to be in this company, to be a CEO or anything. I wasn't even interested in promotion. Yeah. Wasn't there a time when you wanted to be a priest? The thought just kept coming back. And I was thinking, oh, that's ridiculous. God, that was I was in primary 5 or I was in form 6, So I was thinking, it's just stress, When you are stressed, the grass is always greener on the other side. But the interesting was that from that evening onwards, the thought never left my mind. But it would take another year of discernment before I had the courage to quit the job and to finally join the Jesuits. So, but those are little details in between, and I'm sure we will come to those details again. Sorry for the long answer to a very simple question. Yeah, but it's the process that helps me, in a sense, appreciate how God has led me through this entire journey.
Okay, how did I decide to become a priest? I would say that maybe I was naive, didn't know much, and for my 40th year as a priest, I was asked to write a vocation story, my vocation story for Today's Catholic, and this is what I came up with, and I just show you the title, and this is exactly my vocation story. Bodo saya masuk. Yeah, you get it? Yeah, you got it? Yeah. So the title of the vocation story is precisely this, Bodo saya masuk. And I like to explain what I mean by this in the title. I had my primary and secondary education in St. Joseph's School with the De La Salle brothers. I was, in a way, taken up by them because they were coming all the way from Ireland. They were so committed to education of our people here. And also partly because I was told when I was young, I used to have a little blackboard and I would teach to an empty class, of course. Yeah? So maybe there was an interest in teaching in me. In any case, drawn by the brothers and with that perhaps inherent interest in teaching, I just said, okay. After Form 5, I told Brother Binus, who was the principal then, I would want to go to Penang, to their training center, St. Joseph's Formation Center. He said, are you sure? I said, yeah. He said, okay, you go back and I give you a few days to think more about it. What was there to think? So I was so naive, no? I came back after a few days. Yeah, brother, I want to go. So he sent me in January 1964. He sent me to Penang, and I was there for about 8.5 months. And next door to St. Joseph's Training College, the formation center for the brothers, was the major seminary. And we had some Sarawakians there, you know, people like Father Stephen Chain, Father Peter Ng, they were there. And occasionally they would come over to the brothers' place. Yeah, sometimes it was just to visit me. And I was quite drawn by them. Yeah. Then a thought that I proposed to Bishop John Voss then when I decided I would leave the brothers and join the seminary. A reason that I gave was this. I compare, okay, now teaching in class, that's good. But then if you meet someone who is knocked down by a car, someone who has met an accident and he's dying, a brother cannot give anointing of the sick. So you would want this person at least to encounter God. So you would want to administer the sacrament of anointing. So that was the reason I gave. Again, was it genuine? I do not know, but that was what I gave. But looking back, again, it was part of that naivety, you know, the bodo part of me. Looking at the seminarians, oh, so wonderful. And their singing of the Gregorian chant in those days, the Latin hymns, was really very attractive. And maybe that was also part of the drawing factor. So I wrote to Bishop, and Bishop asked me to consider things properly. Then I wrote back to Brother Minus. He said, hey, hold on. It could be a temptation. Give yourself a few more months, which I did. So it was, I think, around mid-August of 1964, then Bishop John Voss officially accepted me and sent me to Penang. And from then on, that formation for the priesthood was not interrupted. Just went straight on. Singapore 2 years, and Penang 6 years, yeah, right up till the end. So again, did I take everything seriously? No, I think I didn't. I just followed, yeah, one day at a time kind of thing, you know. But one day at a time, not with that kind of faith in the Lord, but just say, okay, take things as they come day by day. Enjoy it, enjoy the day. So how did I land up like that? I don't know. It's looking back now, I can say, yeah, God was working, but I didn't feel it. I didn't experience it in any conscious way, but just live from day to day, and God was looking after me. So that's the little vocation story, if you can call it a vocation story, that I have. Bodoh-bodoh saya masuk. And maybe it's better to be naive. If I wasn't naive, if I was like intelligent and very calculative, I'll be calculating a lot of things, and probably I would never have ended up in a seminary. Yeah, so God rides straight on crooked lines. Yes.
Saya masih ingat lagi semasa saya berumur mungkin 8 tahun atau 10 tahun begitu, saya pergi ke misa di St. Joseph Cathedral, dan pada waktu itu saya melihat seorang padri mengangkat hosti, ya, semasa konsekrasi, dan saya melihat dia, wow, betul-betul tertarik dengan dia. Jadi saya beritahu ibu saya, mami, saya mau seperti itu suatu hari nanti. Tetapi ibu saya ada cakap, jangan bising, berdoa saja. Dan selepas itu saya tidak memikirkan lagi pasal untuk menjadi padri. Kemudian apabila saya pergi ke sekolah, saya masih ingat lagi apabila umur kami 15 tahun, dan masa itu kami menduduki peperiksaan PMR, penilaian menengah rendah. Jadi sekumpulan rakan-rakan kami ini, ya, memberitahu saya, mari kita pergi berdoa di chapel di sekolah kami. Ya, masa itu ada chapel untuk para brothers, dan di situ ada tersimpan tubuh Kristus. Dan kami pergi, saya melihat semua mereka berdoa. Saya tidak tahu berdoa. Saya beritahu, Tuhan, saya tidak pandai berdoa, tapi Tuhan tahu apa yang di dalam isi hati saya. Kemudian begitulah beberapa hari semasa peperiksaan kami pergi ke sana dan apabila saya mendapat keputusan, wow, saya mendapat keputusan yang cukup cemerlang. Dari sana saya terfikir, kenapa Tuhan mendengar doa saya? Sudahlah, saya ini tidak tahu berdoa, saya ini bukannya pergi ke gereja setiap minggu, setiap hari, ya, tetapi Tuhan mendengarkan doa saya. Saya mesti seorang yang istimewa di mata Tuhan. Kemudian selepas SPM, begitu juga saya terfikir, apa yang saya mahu lakukan selepas SPM ini? Wah, saya mau belajar, saya mau pergi ke university, saya mau mungkin dapat girlfriend yang cantik, boleh kahwin dan sebagainya. Tiba-tiba terfikir, adakah Tuhan memanggil saya sebagai seorang padri? Saya menoleh ke salib dan saya bercakap dengan Tuhan, Tuhan, carilah orang lain, jangan cari saya. Saya tidak mahu. Kemudian saya mendapat apa yang saya impikan. Saya pergi ke universiti, saya menghabiskan pelajaran saya dan kemudian tahun terakhir saya di universiti juga, semester terakhir, soalan yang sama juga terkeluar. Ya, apa yang saya mahu lakukan selepas ini? Kemudian saya mahu mendapat kerja, membeli kereta, membeli rumah, mendapat kehidupan yang cukup selesa dan berbakti kepada ibu saya. Dan soalan yang sama lagi kembali. Adakah Tuhan memanggil saya? Tuhan, carilah orang lain, saya tidak mau. Saya pada masa itu ada girlfriend lagi dengan saya. Jadi, Tuhan, carilah orang lain. Begitu juga saya mendapat kerja. Apa yang saya mahukan, Tuhan penuhkan impian saya. Sehingga saya mendapat kerja. Saya bekerja sebagai government servant selama 3 tahun di Cebu. Dan apabila saya setiap minggu saya akan meluangkan masa saya 1 jam bersama Tuhan di dalam holy hour, tanpa without fail, tanpa gagal, dan apabila saya bekerja, saya betul-betul cukup puas hati dengan hasil kerja saya, apa yang saya lakukan, segalanya cukup sempurna. Tetapi masih ada lagi kekosongan di dalam hidup saya. Sehingga kan saya bertanya lagi, Tuhan, apa yang saya mahukan sebenarnya? Dan tiba-tiba soalan yang sama kali ketiga keluar lagi. Adakah Tuhan memanggil saya sebagai seorang padri? Dan masa itu saya memang berfikir saya tidak dapat melarikan diri lagi daripada panggilan ini. Dan sehingga saya berjumpa dengan seorang padri dan dia membimbing saya sebelum saya membuat keputusan. Jadi saya di bawah bimbingan dia sepanjang mungkin setahun, 6 bulan begitu, sehingga saya berani mengatakan iya kepada Tuhan. Dan pada masa itu, masalah pertama saya tidak tahu macam mana untuk memberitahu ibu saya. Pada masa itu bapa saya sudah meninggal. Masalah cabaran yang utama adalah memberitahu ibu saya. Saya tidak berani memberitahu ibu saya. Saya cuma beritahu kakak saya. Jadi apa yang saya lakukan? Saya mengambil pen dan menulis surat kepada ibu saya, mengatakan saya akan memasuki seminari. Dan saya tunggu, tidak ada balasan dari ibu saya, panggilan pun tidak ada. Kemudian kakak saya selepas selang 2 minggu dia menghubungi saya, memberitahu ibu saya sudah menerima surat itu, dan dia selama beberapa hari dia menangis kerana dia tidak dapat menerima keputusan saya itu. Namun saya masih lagi belum berani memberitahu dia. Kemudian ada kesempatan saya balik ke Kuching, berjumpa dengan dia dan memberitahu dia secara personal. Dan kami pun saya menjelaskan apa itu saya punya isi hati dan segalanya. Ada juga yang di antara sahabat ataupun keluarga yang tidak bersetuju, tidak menyokong. Mereka mengatakan saya gila, mengatakan saya ini membuat keputusan terburu-buru. Tetapi saya rasa selepas saya membuat keputusan ini, saya tidak pernah menoleh ke belakang lagi. Tidak ada lagi keraguan di dalam diri saya. Malah saya mendapatkan satu ketenangan. Walaupun di dalam perjalanan saya di seminari, saya masih lagi menghadapi cabaran dan sebagainya, ya, tetapi itu bukan membuatkan saya berasa ragu, tetapi ia menyebabkan saya lebih lagi confidence, percaya akan panggilan itu, ya. Tuhan betul-betul memanggil saya.
I remember when I was still in Kindi, and the primary one, teachers would usually ask their pupils, right? So what do you want to be when you grow up? Some even make an essay out of it, or an artwork. I remember at that time, as early as I was 7 or 8, I already thought of, I want to become a priest. And probably that was due to my parents bringing me a lot of times in the church, and me seeing the priest there. I admire them. Wow, this celebrating Mass and being friendly to me personally. I want to be like them. Yeah. I was in Tondo, Manila then, with the Salesian priests and brothers who were really, I see them really giving themselves to the people. From then on, the desire did not leave me. And so I expressed it to my friend, brother then. He was our choir master. Now he's already a Salesian priest also. And he helped me to express my desire to my rector, parish priest then, Father Luis Iriarte. May he rest in peace. He is from Spain, a missionary. My other rector then, Father Peter Zago, an Italian missionary too. And also because of this early missionary Salesian priest that I got to know and admire, I felt now that I am a priest, a Salesian priest, I think God is inviting me to be a missionary myself. It's like I was a recipient of missionaries' generosity and service then. I felt God asking me, now it's payback time, you know. It's your time now to be the giver, not only the receiver. So, thanks be to God, I'm here now. Yeah.
How old were you when you entered the seminary?
At that time, we were still having minor seminaries for secondary school boys. So I was 13 when I entered the seminary, the minor seminary, and took high school, secondary school in that seminary. And then continued with my college. I took up education, still in the seminary. And then that's it, became a novice, and then professed as a Salesian brother. Yeah, we took up philosophy after we call the period practical training. You're assigned in a school or a parish, and you serve there as a young brother for 2-3 years. Yeah. And then philosophy, after that, philosophy first, and then practical training, and then theology, 4 years. In 2001, by the grace of God, I got ordained as a Salesian priest. December 8th, feast of Mary's Immaculate Conception. Yes.
Did you have any doubts about this?
Yes. There were a lot of times, especially we have our monthly recollections, yearly retreats. Every time you end a school year, then you begin to ask again and again, should I continue the next school year and remain here in the seminary? Of course, we were guided by our superiors, our rectors. Oh, how are you here? Are you happy here? Because if you're not, what's the point of staying? No? And the superiors, they talk about us, how are we here, how do they see us? They also have that big role, no, to discern with us, to see, I think this candidate, this this young man, this boy, I think God is really calling him to become a Salesian priest or a brother. So they advise us to continue if that's their assessment. And so especially the time we're in, I needed to continue my college, to enter into college. The time, it was more serious than the usual endings of the school years. Should I leave the seminary now? It's a good time after finishing this course. Or still continue? Lord, are you really calling me? And I remember before my perpetual profession, that one is like our marriage. That is the point wherein we say forever a Salesian. And then ordination, that means forever a priest. That was the time I remember when we were having our retreat to prepare for those events. Again, the doubts came. And they were even stronger than my past doubts, no? Especially the big question of, will I be a good priest? The way I see myself, I have a lot of imperfections, sinfulness. Yeah? Lord, will I be a good priest? I think I cannot. So, I better be a lay person and a good Catholic layman, just like so many I know, than be a priest but a bad priest and even become a scandal to the church. So I'd rather be a good layman than be a bad priest. What if I become a bad priest? But then in my prayer, in my heart, I felt God telling me, it's okay, come on, continue. You know what? You're right. You cannot. You cannot be a good priest. You? How could you? But I felt God telling me, because of me, you will and you can. On my own, I cannot. But by God's grace, and only by God's grace. And then He added, in my prayer, no, I felt it. You know what, Mon? I will be with you. And even if, I hope it won't happen, you turn out to be a bad priest, I will still be with you. I felt that. If ever you'll make your mistakes, I will still be with you. That brought me the courage to say, yes, Lord, grant me your gift of priesthood as a Salesian.